Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Chairman Weigel.
Here.
Judy O'Donnell.
Here.
Steve Bowledge.
Here.
Megan Freitag. Here. Robert Howard.
Here.
Denise Winfrey. Here. Lauren Ferry.
See, we have a quorum. We have minutes from November 12th. They were emailed out. Any additions or corrections? We have a motion.
To approve the minutes.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. New business. Before we go on, let's, since this is a new year, a new committee, I'd like to have each person introduce themselves, and on staff, you can introduce the staff. So here, Reagan.
Reagan Freitag, District 6.
Steve Bowledge, District 7.
Judy O'Gala, District 1.
Tom Weigel, District 12.
Bob Howard, District 1.
Good morning, I'm Denise Winfrey from District 8.
Kurt, would like to introduce the staff?
Sure. I'm Kurt Paddock. I'm the director of the Wil County Land Use Department. To my right is Owen Needham. Owen has been our long-term residential plans examiner. With the recent transfer of Mr. Simplinski from the Land Use Department to the Transportation Division, Owen is serving as our acting building director. Then Mr. Anderson is in our Resource Recovery and Energy Division. He's a senior waste analyst. Then Brian Radner is the assistant director of the department and in charge of our long-range planning activities as well as administrative services affecting the department's operations. Brian, why don't you introduce yourself first?
And with me today is Janine Wilcox. She's our Historic Preservation Manager.
Then these two guys, I think you know, but go ahead, Mike. Tell them who you are.
Mike Smetana, Code Enforcement Manager.
David?
Okay, David DuBois, the Director of the Development Review Division, also act as the zoning administrator.
And David, why don't you introduce the most important person there?
And Pat Klein, she's administrative support for the division. She takes the minutes.
We have Matt Guzman from the State's Attorney's Office. Okay, thank you. First item of business under new business is case 6208S. This is a special use permit for animal care facility in Peotone. Mike, this is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Weigel, members of the committee. This case takes place in Wil Township. The applicant is requesting a special use permit for animal care and boarding. This special use permit request was a result of a violation. The property was cited midsummer 2014 because the owner of the property possessed more than 5 dogs. Anytime someone possesses more than 5 dogs, the Wil County zoning ordinance requires a special use permit. The property is zoned A1. The total acres of the property is 17.28 acres. The special use only is going to occur on 3 acres. It's the 3 acres located in the far northwest corner of the property. The use does comply with the 500-foot setback requirements. Surrounding uses are agricultural, industrial, and rural residential. Staff recommends approval. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval, and Wil Township has no objection. If approved, staff would ask that 4 conditions be appended to the special use permit. Those conditions will ensure that all dogs are registered with the Animal Control Department. They will also ensure that at no time does the number of dogs increase from what's being approved today, which is 10. And that concludes staff's analysis.
Thank you. Any questions by committee? Are there any objectors to this change? Can we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
A motion, and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next case.
I have a question.
Question?
Yeah, hey, Mike, how many cats can you have?
Cats and dogs are considered companion animals.
Oh, are they really?
Yeah, so zoning ordinance states that you cannot have more than 5 companion animals without having a special use permit for animal care and boarding.
You're kidding me.
No.
Wow.
Okay, next case, 6216 MS. This is a special use permit for a truck terminal. This is in Joliet Township, Manhattan Road. David?
Yes, good morning. For this case, I'm covering this case, and Mike will be covering the next case. Emmett Talkington is with the county, or was with the county, no longer with us, prepared their staff reports. For this particular case, there are map amendments from A1 to I1, and then also map amendment from C6 to I1 on 2 different parcels. They're all contiguous. There's also, again, a special use permit for a truck terminal on the property. The property is located on Manhattan Road, or Route 52, which was formerly known as the Christian Youth Center. And on that premise, there's a building that was formerly used for youth activities, including indoor areas for basketball, volleyball, and such. There were also a few outdoor baseball and softball fields, playground, parking lot with a former concession area. The subject property does have one entrance currently onto Route 52. There are regulatory floodplain on the property. On the south part, there's adjacent residences a little bit to the west across the Canadian National Tracks. In the north to the east is primarily a trend of light industrial zoning. To the south is the Forest Reserve District. Again, the owner of the property, again, intends to open up the truck terminal with basically tractor trailers, trailers on the property with some maintenance facilities as well as an office. There were several neighboring residents that did show up to the public hearing. Primary concerns include screening to the north and northwest and possibly the northeast. I know one area resident identified a concern potentially of being highly diesel engines on the property. Staff did recommend approval of all of the requests, and with the recommendation of 14 conditions on the special use permit. Those conditions on the special use permit addressed issues such as hours of operation on the property, the total number of truck tractors and trailers in aggregate units not exceeding 50, addressing concerns of the Forest Reserve District to the south, as well as attempting to address concerns of the neighbor with landscaping and screening on the northwest and northerly property lines with fencing and maintenance and landscape material. But there are 14 conditions that I recommend be attached to the special use permit in an attempt to address concerns of the neighbors.
I understand that the owner has agreed to all the conditions, is that correct?
I know Mr. Hansen's here, and he can address any questions that I know at the public hearing we did not raise any objections to those conditions.
Any other questions by committee?
David, I know you said that, and I saw in our packet that the Forest Reserve had a concern in regards to screening, and in one of the conditions there is a condition for a buffer, but you said that the Forest Reserve property is located south.
That's
but
correct.
The screen, the buffer will be more northwest. So I mean, is there going to be a screening element to help with the Forest Reserve?
I would ask Mr. Hansen potentially to be able to address that in more detail and either modify the conditions, they reflect that or do so.
Mike, would you like to come down the podium? State your name and address, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Michael Hansen, attorney, 735 Essingen Road, Joliet. Mr. Freitag, we did meet with the Forest Reserve District on March tomorrow. We have on our proposed site plan, we put in a row of trees and other landscaping items on the south part of the property, in addition to the north up by Manhattan Road, to satisfy the concerns of the Forest Reserve District. We also are going to be doing some other studies on the property just to ensure that there won't be any groundwater leakage from our property out of the Forest Reserve property. Those are the requests of Marcy, and we have no problem with those.
Thank you.
Any other questions by committee? Motion for approval? Motion. Second. Is there any objectors to this? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This is for the special use permit. We need a motion for amendment from A1 to I1. Move. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Need a motion for amendment from C6 to I1. Motion? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, just for the record, we'll interpret the second motion from C6 to I1 to apply to both pins.
Yes.
Next item is case 6217S. Special use permit for a bar in Lennox Township. Okina.
Thank you, Chairman Weigel. As you stated, this case takes place in New Lennox Township. The applicant is requesting a special use permit for a bar. Now, this is a unique case. The property is currently improved with a liquor store. That liquor store possesses a special use permit for packaged liquor sales. The property is at the northwest corner of Route 6 and Parker Road. I would say that liquor store has been there for at least 30 years. The applicant would like to apply for a video gaming license with the state of Illinois. We've been told that the state of Illinois requires that on-site alcohol consumption take place in order for that video gaming license to be issued. We handled a case like this approximately a year and a half ago. It was in Lockport Township on McGregor. The county board did approve that special use permit. We have had no issues with that operation since the approval date. So the applicant is requesting a special use permit for a bar to allow for on-site alcohol consumption so that he can obtain a video gaming license from the state of Illinois. Staff recommended approval with 4 conditions. The Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended approval. That concludes staff's analysis.
Any questions by committee? Lee?
My only question is, and I don't know if you know this, Mike or Matt, if you could, do you know if we receive any revenue from these video gaming licenses, or does that go to Illinois or the gaming board?
I do not know the answer to that. I'm not sure.
There's a
Okay. I think the county does if it's unincorporated.
yeah.
You would get revenue. Yeah. I don't know how much it amounts to, something. Okay. Yes.
That site is in my district, the same as the one in Lockport, and the gentleman contacted me, and I went there and looked at it and talked to him, saw what he wanted, and I thought it was a good idea, just so the other members know.
Thank you. Is there a comment up here from the public? No. Any objectors to this change? We have a motion to approve. Motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. The other business is a text amendment concerning outdoor lighting. David?
Chairman Weigel and I've got some dialogue on this particular topic with the outdoor lighting within the zoning ordinance. The current language of the zoning ordinance does not address potential nuisance to residentially zoned property, residential uses on residentially zoned property. With the revisions in 2012, it was the intent with those revisions to exempt residential uses from a lot of restrictions of that particular section of the ordinance. What I've done is gone back and revisited and reviewed the zoning ordinance and found a location to reinsert into the text language that would help us address residential lighting that could be perceived to be a nuisance or a hazard. It does not get into regulating specific book handle thresholds for anything of that nature from a technical standpoint, but does provide some rationale and logic for going and addressing those situations as we're currently getting complaints on. For instance, an example is a neighbor shining floodlights into another neighbor's windows through a side door. I will be having dialogue with the state's attorney's office to see how this provision could be implemented retroactively to try to address situations that currently exist. But this particular language, if you look at the ordinance, it's on actually the last page of the memo that I prepared. It just inserts the language that states the following. Lights on lots occupied by detached houses, townhouses, and two-unit residential buildings subject to the following requirements. And I added subject to the following requirements. Lighting shall not create a nuisance or hazard or nuisance and should be shielded whenever possible to prevent light and glare spillover to adjacent property and lighting rights of way. So the language should is in there. It's not necessarily mandatory. There's some discretion there, but it does leave some judgment again to try to address situations where there's a hazard or a nuisance on the property. And this is a standalone text amendment that if the committee would accept this particular language, then we would go forward and set it for a public hearing for a text amendment to go back through the process, and then we'll come back to the ultimate board for consideration.
Okay, questions by committee?
Does that, can we address that through photometrics, like a developer would provide photometrics? I mean, can you put standards on the photometrics? Is that something that we can look at?
There are provisions within the ordinance for commercial and industrial properties that do have technical specifications.
Sure.
But with the comprehensive revision of the zoning ordinance in 2012, it was a conscious decision by the board to not do that, to not be that restrictive on residential uses in agricultural zone property.
Okay, but the problem is that basically it's just a call then. It's a judgment call. And then you, theoretically, you could provide permission for one individual and then deny another individual. I mean, you know, I'm just saying if there's a standard, it kind of makes it cut and dry, and it takes us out of the process. You know? So, that's just.
I mean, it is true, it does allow for some discretion in the administration of the ordinance, but you know, if the committee does desire for us to go further and look at actual technical specifications on residential uses, we can do that. But through the permit process, that could be potentially onerous upon residential uses and potentially costly for certain fixtures. Right. And from an enforcement standpoint, it can be very difficult as well.
Steve, you got a comment?
Yeah. When you're talking about not having any rules to guide this, it reminds me of an ordinance that Homer Glenn made where they said that if a dog barks for more than 15 minutes, a violation. Well, people were recording dogs barking for more than 15 minutes and saying their neighbor's dog is barking for more than 15 minutes. So, you know, having a law that isn't more specific and one that can actually be enforced, because it really needs to have it where if I look at a light, it don't bother me. You look at a light and it bothers you. So what's the rule? You know, we can't go into something without an exact rule. But on a different note, you know, we keep making more and more laws. And, you know, our books are loaded with laws. And so it gets to the point where, you know, you go to someone's house and if you want, you can find something wrong with everything in their house. You know, so I don't like the idea of adding any more laws. You know, I think we got more than enough on the books. And if there's a nuisance, isn't there a thing called a nuisance law already on? That's a law. That if somebody's doing a nuisance, that you call sheriff or whoever and say that there's a nuisance from my neighbor, and they won't remedy it. There's already that law. Why do we got to increase the number of laws on the books? I don't get it.
Mike?
Just real quick to address the nuisance statement. I did review the county codes. We do have public nuisance codes on the books already, but they're very specific on what is a nuisance. It does not address lighting at this time as a nuisance.
Well, maybe the idea would be to add something into the nuisance code rather than make a whole new law. I mean, I don't like the idea of having a stack of laws that are so high, a mountain, you can never read them all. You know, I think that we should like get rid of a whole bunch of the laws and combine them with other laws and then revisit and try and make it where everybody can understand what the rules are. You know, I don't have a problem with saying, like, if I have a floodlight shining in my neighbor's bedroom, that's not right. But at the same time, the neighbor should be able to have a remedy without going to a new law that we had. We should make it part of our nuisance law. And if that's happening, and then somebody can make a determination. And a lot of these nuisance laws are somebody is playing music so loud that you can't sleep at night. Or, you know what I'm saying? You shouldn't have to make a law about lights. If lights shine in the neighbor's bedroom, the neighbor should have enough common sense to turn it. But if they don't, which a lot of cases they don't, because they don't like each other, so they keep trying to fight with each other and cause problems, so they're going to use the government as a way to go after each other. So then you have one neighbor fighting another neighbor by calling the code enforcement. Because the other guy, when you go out there and say that you're a nuisance, then he's going to say, well, my neighbor's a nuisance for some other stupid reason. You know, it's going to go back and forth. So I think it's important that we don't encourage that type of thing, and we make a remedy within the laws we already have.
David? This language that I have in the draft that I reinserted was there prior to the 2012 revision. It's the exact same language that was there prior. It's reinserted into it. So it was there for 22 years prior. And that's with the 2012 revision. I think, you know, with the context of the whole residential zoning with regard to lighting was addressed, and when that was removed, this is the situation we found ourselves in. And so what this actually does is put the language back in. Really, so for today, I mean, we're looking for direction from the committee. Don't do anything, leave it as it is. Go to the nuisance ordinance, look at that, reinsert this language in here, or if you guys want us to go back and look at something else, you know, let us know.
I don't think we're expanding our laws, adding a new law. We're just adding another sentence in there that was in there before to clarify situations that come up in the community. So I think it should go forward.
Yeah, I have a question. This is not related to this exact situation here, but I was on the news recently. There was this older couple that had their, I don't know if you saw it on TV, and it had their, across the street was a big billboard, and it was one of those big bright billboards that changed constantly. So that caused problems to the people sleeping there, and they told them, go ahead and just get, you know, new window covering to block the light and everything like that. How do we address anything like that in the county?
The zoning ordinance does address the elimination from outdoor advertising. There are standards in the current ordinance that do address that.
Okay, good, because I know that this couple didn't have anything to go back on, so. I know it can be an issue, I know driving down the road, and that's the first case that we had here today with the special use permit. That was two neighbors clashing, so this one called about that, and this one called about that, and you have that issue all the time, which is unfortunate, because people move out to the country because they want to be able to do mostly what they want, and then the neighbor gets angry or whatever. So we always have those crazy situations. I don't know that you can solve it except for to put language, I guess, that makes sense as best we can handle it. And if it is sort of up to the discretion of us, and if it's in the nuisance or here, if it was in there, maybe keep it there, but it's bad. You have to handle it. Sometimes you go down the road and you'll see somebody with a floodlight pointed out at the street. You can't even see if you're driving down the road. So.
One of the other problems that, you know, I just thought about, in Homer Glen, it's a dark sky community. So Homer Glen, you know, they're really big on lights. They even took good street lights out and put in these crappy street lights that don't shine. So, you know, I mean, they're really, really meticulous about the light ordinance. Well, if you live in the township, which butts up to it, you don't have to obey that law. So now, are we going to have a war between unincorporated people and the village of Homer Glen saying that you guys can't have your floodlights in your yard?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that during the period of time that we worked with the board to revise the zoning ordinance, the folks who have been instrumental in advocating for the dark sky ordinance in Homer Glen were very, very active in the whole stakeholder process for the revision of our ordinances. So their particular point of view was in the mix when we made the changes that we
I
did.
was trying to say for the unincorporated people.
Right. Well,
are they going to be subject now to Homer Glen saying this is a nuisance
No.
light because
no, I mean,
we don't like them?
wherever ordinances Homer Glen has only are operative within their corporate boundaries.
Right, I understand that, but if we change our law to say that a nuisance law, what we're talking about, adding this in, that it's a nuisance. Now, the Village of Homer Glen says all these floodlights are a nuisance. So if your house is real close to the border of Homer Glen and you're unincorporated, you should be allowed to have the floodlight in your yard. But Homer Glen says it's a nuisance. Now we're going to be having a fight with Homer Glen?
No, I don't think so. Perhaps we can have the state's attorney comment on it, but if, let's say the Homer Glen resident, aware of the standards for outdoor lighting, and Homer Glen looks across the way and sees a light that they believe that is in an unincorporated area, that they believe does not conform to the standards of Homer Glen, they're not going to be able to look to Wil County to enforce the Homer Glen ordinance, and they're not going to be able to look at Homer Glen and they're to enforce in the unincorporated areas.
What I'm trying to get at is Homer Glen would be the neighbor who says that the unincorporated.
They would have no standing, Mr. Babish. They would have no standing. You want to comment on it?
That's correct.
They'd have no standing.
Okay.
Good, bad, or indifferent, we sort of live in a world where municipal boundaries exist and then the unincorporated area exists. The laws of the unincorporated areas are the laws of the unincorporated areas. The laws of the incorporated areas apply there. You don't enforce one another's rules across boundaries.
Well, remember we had numerous conversations about burning, and in the unincorporated you could burn, and in the city you couldn't burn, and people wanted to make it where you couldn't burn in unincorporated because the city was complaining about it. And I'm saying it'd be the same thing. Well, dark sky places like Homer Glen be complaining, and we're going to have that same argument that we did with burning.
Well, I don't really see that applying at all. The point is, yes, the municipality or people who were in municipalities were trying to persuade the county board to adopt laws that would be congruent with the laws of their particular municipality. But that was a decision solely at the prerogative of the county board, because they're the ones that have the governing authority for their jurisdiction. I grant you that there are complexities that arise out of the fact that we border municipalities, our area of jurisdiction. But in terms of enforcement authority, they are pretty much separated.
I'll call for the question. Okay, we call for the question, motion to move this forward. Mr. Howard?
Yeah.
Second by Ms. Winfrey. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Company is a no.
Motion carries. Next item, dynamic displays. David?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is in the context of moving an individual text amendment forward in lieu of lumping it with many others that will be coming forward, is that we have interested parties that would like to see some kind of consideration at the board level for text changes. And what this does is the second one gets back to dynamic displays of non-residential types that may be in residential or agricultural zoning. And what do I mean by that? If you have a religious institution that may be in a residential zone district, we have an American Legion that is in a residential zone district. But under the current provisions of the ordinance, they're not authorized to have a dynamic display on premise. And some churches and some other not-for-profits may desire to do so. Rather than get into identifying a litany of specific requirements that would allow them by right, the staff reviewed this and recommends that perhaps the board consider allowing on-premise dynamic displays in agricultural and residential zoning districts as special use permits. So in that way, we can deal with them on an individual basis and allow the board to give them their due consideration and approve them individually. An example, another one is, I forgot to mention, is a golf course up in northern Wil County. It's residentially zoned, real estate zoning, but again, because of the zoning ordinance, they're not allowed to have a dynamic display, and they'd like to have it on the golf course.
Okay, perhaps you could explain what a dynamic display is.
It's the digital display. It's time, temperature, message on activities or otherwise.
This was brought forward by the Plainfield American Legion, I believe, wasn't it? They were one of them.
Initially, that was one of them. There's, like you mentioned, there's a golf course in northern Wil County Park District that would like to have a display as well. But they can't, under the current ordinance, be authorized to do that. And so this text amendment would allow each of those individual institutions to apply for a special use permit.
What is that? Does that add a cost then? I mean, like we have a lot of local churches by us, so if they decide to put up a sign, what's additional cost going to be to them besides the sign?
There's if it's a non-governmental entity, there could be a zoning application fee, which is a non-residential fee of $2,500. There is a provision for waivers for zoning fees for governmental entities.
Just governmental. How about religious?
No.
So if a poor little church in the country wants to get a sign out there, it's going to cost them minimum $2,500 just
for non-residential, and that is to recoup the county's cost of going through the process of doing so.
Wow.
Recall the situation now is they can't do it at all. So the point is, if we want to give entities of that type the opportunity to use that particular type of sign, one way of doing that is to put it in under a special use permit process, which would then give rise to the need to pay fees. Another way to do it would give just broad authority to entity of that type to use that type of sign. I think the decision that you have to make is, are you willing to just basically make it a by right type of thing, that everybody in a particular zone, if they happen to be a church or a nonprofit or whatever, can have a dynamic sign, and that the downside of that is that possibly somebody may get a sign that somebody else finds it troublesome or bothersome of one way or another. But with the special use permit, you then have the opportunity to review it one by one. But the constraint of that one, the downside of that one, is that under the board's adopted fee schedule, it would be $2,500.
Any questions by committee?
Yeah.
Judy?
So if we did go ahead and do that, I can see some neighbors might be upset if the light was on all night. Could we put restrictions as to it shouldn't be on longer than a certain time? It isn't I know that I live out east in eastern Wil County, and we do have the airport compound, as we call it, and they have blazing lights going. There isn't a sign like this, but I could see people maybe across the street being offended if the light was on too long. I'm wondering, I understand they want it so they can display their stuff during the evening hours, especially during winter. But could we put in a restriction like after 10 or something like that? I'm just wondering, what do you guys think?
Well, I'm just thinking a special use by its very nature carries restrictions, so whatever the need would be, and it's a case by case. For instance, a golf course, if they had a sign out advertising specials, for some at a reduced rate or whatever, there'd be a limitation when they apply for the permit, would be as a part of the condition of them being able to hit the sign that limits the hours they can show it, which way it faces, what kinds of things can be put on. All of that would be as a part of the permit. Is that correct?
That we can look at each case individually and recommend conditions that could mitigate any adverse impacts. We could not do anything with content, sign content, but
right.
But as far as the lighting, shutoffs, and things of that nature, we could recommend conditions.
Okay, and then I guess when they get that special use permit, that's good as for the life of that sign?
If they, on their application, document within the application that they intend to be in perpetuity,
Okay, and if they would change a sign, then we would look at that again individually, say it's for just this particular sign, or?
it would, the special use permit would be for that particular dynamic display.
Yeah, I'm kind of hung up on the fee schedule. The $2,500, why does it cost so much for that? Just out of curiosity.
That was in 2007. We went through a comprehensive fee schedule revision where we did an analysis of all the different costs that were associated with processing different kinds of zoning applications, plats, and came out with a flat fee on what it did cost to recoup per application. And the board at that time decided to differentiate between industrial and commercial permits and residential permits, and reduced the cost of the residential permits and increased industrial and commercial permits to kind of balance it out. So there was a conscious decision by the board to set that fee schedule for those particular rates based upon the analysis and the actual cost recovery.
And the technology is changing, so I mean, maybe that's something we need to look at again for the non-for-profits, you know, like a church or whatever, because especially where I live, there's quite a few churches out there. And then as the technology changes, and if they do go to a message board or something like that out there, you know, I think maybe that's something that we can look at. And how complicated would that be to change something like that? Does that have to go through public hearings and all that again?
There would be a public hearing process to modify the fee schedule.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? We have a motion to move this forward. Motion moved. Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item, building code change for Reichert.
Committee. Just some background information on the property. We applied for a storage building permit June 11, 2013, and it was issued June 28, 2013. And at some point, they called for inspection on underground plumbing and wanted to put a residential use in the part of the building, which requires a special use permit from zoning and has to be owner occupied as part of the commercial building. All residential occupancies under the International Building Code requires sprinklers for life safety. Former committee members requested new language to allow the owner-occupied residential occupancy without sprinklers. And that's what you see in front of you, proposal 5.3.8.
Okay.
I have other copies if anybody needs them.
Any questions by committee? A motion to move this forward? Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Dave?
And also, just so the committee's clear on when you can expect to have, I guess to give these further consideration, is that the next Planning and Zoning Commission is the first week of February, and we're on a tight timeline for publication and getting those notices out. So if it does not appear on the February commission, they'll be on the March commission, and then it'll go back through the whole process to the committee and to the board. And I just want to be clear, so if you want to where things are at, that's the process. All three of those will fall.
That's fine.
Mr. Good, also just for the benefit of new members of the committee that perhaps hadn't been following real closely this involvement regarding the Reichert property, it had zoning dimensions as well as building code dimensions. The particular measure that you just put forward for public hearing would remove one of the impediments for coming into compliance with the building code. But the matter of getting the necessary zoning change, it was the decision of the applicant to let that sit and not pay the fee to move that forward until they knew that it was going to be possible to get the building code matter into compliance. It would make very little sense to go to all the trouble of paying non-refundable fees to move the zoning matter forward if the board did not pass this change to the building code. So my point is that even once, just assuming for the moment that this goes through the hearing and is ultimately adopted by the board, the applicant will still have to then complete the underlying zoning change that's required. So it may be a while before that entire matter is resolved.
Okay. They're aware of this. Yeah.
Their folks are sitting right there.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Rural Historic Structural Consultant contract.
Good morning. Up before you today, we are requesting approval to accept the proposal from Ms. Janie Elsner to begin the Rural Historic Structural Survey of Wilton Township. We have a grant for funds to begin part one of Wilton Township. It's about a third of the township. And we have applied for a grant to complete the township. We'll receive notification of that in March sometime. So right now, we're just looking for approval to proceed with part one, because we have the grant secured, and we have the proposal from Jamie Elsner. We started these surveys in 1999, and we've done 19 townships so far. So this will be our 20th township, and we're just hoping to continue this project.
Thank you. Any comments by committee? There's a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. That concludes our business as far as reports or comments. I have no comments. Committee members, any comments? Land Use Director, Mike?
We do have a report from the director. We'll pass out some paperwork for you.
Wanted to bring a particular situation to your awareness because it's been ongoing and I imagine it will continue. And it's quite possible that one of the parties involved may be reaching out to you. They have been in contact with the chairman and I believe have made efforts to be in contact with the vice chairman. So it's possible that others of you may be hearing from the situation. So we just simply wanted to give an overview of what's involved. In short here, you got two adjacent properties. One's pretty much purely a residential use. Next door, you've got a situation where the folks legitimately are operating a small stable operation. Over the years, the one neighbor has expressed concerns about the handling of manure, which is, as we all know, a fundamental byproduct of any stabling operation. We enforce matters pertaining to proper storage of manure, proper spreading of manure, disposal of it, etc. And when we get a call, we go out and we take a look at the situation. Well, this has been going on for a number of years. A new element that has been brought up by the complainant is that he very tragically experienced a situation where he had two dogs that contracted a particular type of fungal infection that is it's referred to as blastomycosis. And he is of the view that the origin of this fungal infection is arising from the manure mixed with sawdust on his neighbor's property. Well, that specific subject of mixing it with sawdust or testing it for its content of this particular type of fungal infection, which occurs in nature, is not a part of our existing ordinances, but nevertheless, desire to do community service, we referred the matter out to various experts at the University of Illinois, and you'll see some reference to their comment and feedback. Tim Anderson, who's our enforcement officer on a wide variety of matters, but including matters of manure disposal, is here to answer any questions you might have. But in short, the current situation is that in the view of the department, after, you can only see what you see on the day that you're out there. But on all the various visits that we have taken to this property, we have found no violations of any county ordinances or no violations of any state statutes which we have delegated authority to enforce through our agreement with IEPA. This finding is not very satisfactory to Mr. Browning, but we will continue to work with him and we will continue to enforce all the laws and ordinances that we're responsible for enforcing. But just want you to be aware of the background, answer any questions you might have, because it's quite likely that at some point along the way, Mr. Browning either may make an appearance here or call you by phone. I just want you to have a little background of our perspective on the matter.
when you were talking about the dog getting that disease, the dogs more than that, did the dogs have to go on the guy's property to get the disease, or is it something that's airborne?
Well, Tim, you want to comment?
The dogs, to my knowledge, have never been on the respondent's property. In fact, the respondent does have 3 dogs themselves that Mike and I witnessed actually in the corral sniffing the manure that Mr. Browning says is causing the issues with his dogs. While we were out there, his dogs, the respondent's dogs, looked healthy. They didn't have any lesions like Mr. Browning said his dogs had. And talking to several experts on blastomycosis, blastomycosis is found in the soil, not in manure, and it is caused by dogs digging and sniffing through their snout that causes the infection to enter the lungs.
Yeah, they kind of answered my question. So in other words, if the dogs didn't go on the other guy's property, they'd be getting it from their own property. And it's in the soil, not the manure. So I think it's another deal with the neighbor, not liking the other neighbor.
Comment?
Yeah, I actually have livestock, and I have dogs. And dogs love to roll enforcement over a cow member. I mean, that's, if the dog gets loose, and if he does get over there, I mean, they're attracted to this stuff for some odd reason. I just find it interesting. I didn't know that the manure would hurt them, but you know, you just can't let them in the house.
Well, we don't know it for a fact that the manure hurts them. It's the degradation of organic material that hurts, that causes the disease. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Kurt, this proposal?
Let's see here. I just wanted to mention to new members of the committee as well as continuing members of the committee, the work of this land use committee, as you know better than anybody else, is very complex and complicated and requires new members to learn lots of new material and learn lots of new definitions and so on and so forth. And I'm sure you educate yourselves in a wide variety of ways. I just simply wanted to state the obvious. You don't need my invitation to make this happen, but at any time that either as a group or as individually you would like to come by the department to sit down and learn a little bit more about, well, what the heck is a special use permit and what's the criteria for granting it? What is a text change? What is a variance? You know, we would be happy to sit down and chat with you about all of these things, as well as any other aspect of the operations of the department, if you would find that to be a more conducive atmosphere than the formality of the committee room. I just want you to know we're here to help you in that regard at any time.
Thank you. Have a motion to adjourn?
So motion.
Motion, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.